This is the You Winning Life Podcast, your number one source for mastering a positive existence. Each episode will be interviewing exceptional people, giving you empowering insights, and guiding you to extraordinary outcomes. Learn from specialists in the worlds of integrative and natural wellness, spirituality, psychology, and entrepreneurship, so you too can be winning life. Now, here's your host, licensed marriage and family therapist, certified neuro-emotional technique practitioner, and certified entrepreneur coach, Jason Wasser.
I am super excited for today's guest. He is Joe DeSena. He's the founder and CEO of Spartan Race. He has been an entrepreneur since his preteens, where he started selling fireworks at 8 years old, to having a t-shirt business in high school and then building a multi-million-dollar pool business in college. He then went off, created a Wall Street trading firm, and he is the living definition of an entrepreneur. Joe is a New York Times bestselling author of Spartan Up, a Take No Prisoner's Guide to Overcoming Obstacles and Achieving Peak Performance in Life, and Spartan Fit, the 30 Days, Transform Your Mind, Transform Your Body, Commit to Grit, as well as his most recent book called 10 Rules for Resilience, Mental Toughness for Families. He is the co-host of the Spartan Up podcast, and you can see him also on his newest show, CNBC's No Retreat, which is bringing businesses and business owners together to his farm in Vermont to do Spartan course type training, bringing leadership and problem solving together. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Joe to the podcast. All right. So Joe, first of all, thank you so much. And as we just shared, I met you briefly at the GoBundance conference about a month and a half ago. And one of the most amazing things about seeing you speak, and I unfortunately had to leave halfway through your presentation to do another interview, was how many times you made us do burpees during your presentation.
I'm a big believer in health and wellness. My mother was into health food in the early 70s. She met a yogi and she brought all these crazy thoughts that were so new age into the house that it led to a divorce between my dad and my mom. And but it stuck. It eventually stuck. I resisted. And I used to clean swimming pools when I was young. Mm-hmm. A lot of swimming pools, believe it or not, for mob bosses. And I remember sitting there cleaning, 700 swimming pools a week, it got to eventually, and thinking, wow, the human body is exactly like a swimming pool. The human body has a pump and a filter, and it's mostly water. And I'm constantly trying to help these swimming pools that are turning green not to turn green. And if I was to turn off the pump, the pool would turn green. If I was to clog the filter, the pool would turn green. If there were too many leaves in the pool would turn green. And I remember sitting there, again, I did this for like 12 years,
sure,
swimming pools a week during the season. And I remember standing there thinking, wow, if we turn off our pump, our heart, we turn green. If we don't clean our filters, we turn, right? So and then we expect this little body, this little 13-gallon swimming pool, the human body, we expect it to process burgers and fries and ketchup and coffee and ice cream and a 20,000 gallon, right? So the burpees to me are cleaning the swimming pool. It's that simple.
I love it. You're priming the pump. And that's one of the things, as I did a deep dive into all of your stuff and have read all the books, and I don't even know how many hours of YouTube videos and interviews that I've seen at this point. But, one of the things that I really love and appreciate what you're doing is, besides the fact that you created Spartan and you created a community and you're changing people's lives, is actually the psychological changes that are happening for people in your community and the amount of just awareness of how you can transform things so simply with a consistency. So you talk about turning your childhood emotional pain into an outboard motor. So, right, there's a whole process about that in one of the books. But the question on that is, how does a person determine what's healthy versus unhealthy for them when they're doing that? Because a lot of times people might try to avoid, right? You talk about avoiding discomfort or blocking pain. So how have you figured, or how would you guide people to determine that really what is that true well-being of healthy versus unhealthy, especially if they're going into a Spartan race community or some type of health community or something like that, where it doesn't get stuck in ego. It doesn't get stuck in the BS and go really true with that authenticity and health.
So the way I think about it is we're all addicted to something. Most of us are addicted to comfort, most of us. And I just look at it and say, if we're all addicted to something, let's make sure that something is more healthy than the other thing. So, if you go all in because of your childhood issues into drinking or drugs or, you name it, I would say that's in the unhealthy class. If you're taking that energy, those issues, and you're running, maybe you're overrunning, maybe you're running 15 miles every day, 7 days a week, and you're like, it's probably too much, but I'd rather have that than the other. Mm-hmm. Right? So I accept that we're all addicted to something, and I think I can draw the line on what's healthy and what's not. I'm definitely addicted to work. My expression of my child, right, it comes out in the workaholic tendencies I have, but the other side of my family isn't. And thank God my wife recognizes my unbalance, but it's healthy. It's not mm-hmm. It's not as healthy as if I had toned it down a bit, but it's healthier than, I'm not playing golf every day. I'm not flirting with women. I'm not drinking. So that's my thing. I work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things when you met your wife, right, you guys were at a competition together, right? So I talk about this all the time with my clients, whether it's for relationships or dating or business related stuff, is the idea of core values and meeting people in the places where you want your ideal life to be, finding business partners in the ideal environments, right? Like you said, I'm not going out and drinking and flirting and all those other things. So when we're looking to streamline the chaos in life, right? It's simplicity on the far side of complexity. When people are doing some type of training program, when they're like signing up for a Spartan race and they're afraid to do that, how would you suggest they make it the simplest? It's obviously effort and it's obviously work that needs to be consistent, but how would you suggest them setting up the mindset and then the practical application of moving into that goal?
Well, again, when I talk in generalities across our entire society. Mm-hmm. So we are not going to do what needs to be done in general. To be healthy, to be fit, to be our optimal selves. We're just not going to do it. However, we do it and we take it seriously when our back is against the wall, when we find out, God forbid, that we're sick, when we have a wedding coming up and we are the groom or the bride, we want to look our best. Yeah. When summer is approaching and we have to wear a bikini, when there's a race on the calendar, when a boxer all of a sudden takes the title fight, now the boxer has to stop eating the burgers and start training. So mm-hmm. What I found, the life hack that I found is you got to get a date on the calendar. Without it, most of us are just not going to do the work. So get a date on the calendar. And the paradox with it is most people say, well, I'm not ready for that date. And my response is, that's what gets you ready.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to do the work. Like I try to say this over and over. I don't know if people get it. If you would do it on your own, then here's the way the world would work. The U.S. military, instead of wasting all that money at boot camp and everything else, would just hand you a manual and say, hey, read the manual, do all the work, we'll call you if we have a war. But they don't do that because no one would get in shape. No one would learn what they're supposed to learn. Professors and colleges wouldn't need buildings. They would just say, here's the coursework, do the work, we'll take a final at the end. It doesn't happen that way. So you got to have a date on the calendar. And then I would say, now that you've got that pressure, that accountability, it really is this simple, what I'm about to say. Life is this simple. I wrote a tiny little book, cost me 40 cents to print them. You can get them for free online. It's called Ready for Anything. Okay. And in the book, it explains what I'm about to say, which is just drink more water, less of everything else. 90% water every day. Just drink more water. You're going to be mentally happy. You're going to be more physically fit. You're going to feel better. Sweat every morning before breakfast. Earn your breakfast. Came from Jack LaLanne. It's so true because for most of our existence on the planet, we had to earn our breakfast. We didn't have a fridge in the cave or Uber Eats back then. We had to do the work in order to eat.
Sure.
There's a whole host of other biological benefits to sweating before you eat. Like we shouldn't get dopamine hits in our brain before we do the work. And now we can get dopamine hits in the brain before we do, because we could just swipe up. We could order. We could turn the temperature. And so we don't have to do any work to get this dopamine, to get this food. And that, for lack of a better word, that fucks with our heads.
Sure.
Beneath the surface. So sweat before breakfast, drink more water, go to bed early. Like, I understand if you have a night shift, if you're working late at night, then all bets are off. But for 99% of us, go to bed early, and like nothing good happens after 11 p.m. Right. There's nothing good that happens. Like,
well, there might be repeats of your show on CNBC at 11 p.m. So
there you go.
That's a good excuse.
So go to bed early. Wake up early. I'm not a morning person. Become a fucking morning person.
Yeah.
The body and the mind are designed to be up when the sun is coming up, and to be down when the sun is going down. So that should be logical to anybody listening. I get it. If you work a night shift, all bets are off. Take a cold shower. Take a cold shower. Why the hell would I take a cold shower? I spend all this money on hot water, this beautiful house. Why would I take a cold shower? Because there's so much science that it builds your immunity. It improves circulation. It makes you happier, even though you're miserable when you do it. It reconnects the brain and body. Literally, this vagus nerve gets strengthened, the connection between the brain and body, by taking cold showers. So there's like 12 things, if you did them. Take the stairs instead of the escalator. I've been to fitness conventions where there's like 10,000 fitness professionals, and there's a staircase next to an escalator. And the entire room is taking the escalator, and I don't understand it. Like
the obviousness of that, yeah.
Yeah, take the stairs, whatever chance you get, and then salad, more salad, less everything else, and don't turn your salad into a pizza. Eat salad, a little oil and vinegar. Eat as much as you want. 10 pounds of salad if you want. And, cut back on everything else.
So you're going back to basics, which it really was, right? You're stripping away all the BS, all the, right, the guru stuff of do this thing and do that diet. And it is accurate and it is spot on, because I do see the benefits of people who are connected to your community. And, I'm planning on signing up for the Jacksonville one in February. And, as I was processing that, I'm like, how can I have Joe without committing to doing something, in return for that? And I realized my fear.
I have a challenge for you.
Yeah.
You're going to do Jacksonville. Here's what I want you to do. You have a charity you're connected to, GoBundance?
I have multiple. Yeah. I mean, GoBundance I was just there for that weekend, and I know that you committed to giving charity on behalf of.
So you're in charge of getting 300 people to run with you. They've never run before. We're going to give all the money to the charity of your choice.
Okay.
And that's what I would challenge you with, which it's not going to be easy to convince 300 people. It's very hard. But you have a podcast.
Right.
Where you have more than 300 people listening.
Mm-hmm.
And so what a great way to energize and activate your community. And we're not going to break any records. What we're going to do is get a date on the calendar for these people. That's what our goal is. And so I give that to you, and I hope you take it.
I'm completely going to take it. And that's why I say, like, people signing up, right? Me thinking about this, right? I was healthy, an athlete when I was younger, and then life happened and I'm finally back into it. And that's a big step for a lot of people. And I've known that you talk about like 80-year-olds doing it, and your kids have done it and all these things. How do we take away that fear, right? I know you talk about committing it, putting it on the schedule, but going into something where it's like, well, I'm going to get dirty and I might, people might throw up, or I might, how do you get beyond that fear factor of whether it's signing up for a Spartan, whether it's doing anything that's big, where the fear starts setting in? What would you?
I go back to the most dangerous thing in life is inaction. you just won't move. You're frozen. And I had so many friends when I was growing up that didn't want to start the business with me, that didn't want to go to college when I went to college, that didn't want to go to Wall Street when I went to Wall Street. And they had all good reasons at that moment. Maybe it was fear-based, whatever it was, but they sounded logical. And time just passed them by. Mm-hmm. And I've heard enough regrets in my life that, and I realized that they're not real threats when we're afraid of them. Like, a real threat is a lion coming out at you, right? A bear that you're facing in the woods alone. You're in the Ukraine and you're surrounded by the enemy. Like, those are real threats. The stuff that scares us, what I would say is write it down. I'm really afraid of this. I don't want to do it. And then look back 30 days and look at all those fears and see how many actually transpired. None.
Yeah.
They're not legitimate fears. And so if you want to live your life in fear and inaction, you're going to have a lot of regrets. And once I learned that, I just turned around and said, fire, ready, aim. I'm going to take action, right? I'm going to get ready, and then I'll fucking figure it out later.
Which makes so much sense, because I know we get stuck in that like analysis paralysis, right? And then therefore we take ourselves out of the experience, or just not committing or doing anything. And one of the things I've learned about you in the last little bit is, like, I'm really impressed with how on one side you can be a total ass-kicking badass, and on the other side you have this incredibly compassionate, very loving, very caring personality. And a lot of people don't get this about, like, once you get involved in like a fitness community, or you go all in on work and you become a crazy entrepreneur, that you find this imbalance in people's personalities. And listening to a ton of your your podcasts and your YouTube videos and other things that you've done, and watching you on TV, like, and just reading your books and having you talk about your children and your family, it's beautiful to see that there's this, rejoined of both sides, right? Like, people are like, well, you have to be all alpha and they have to go out there and do this. And then the betas aren't going to be anything in accomplishing anything, and you lose the emotional side. How have you been able to weave those two things together? I know you talked about your parents' divorce and a lot of the conflicts that come up with that, and a lot of your podcasts and everything like that in your books. What have you done to really merge those two sides of you together?
I read a lot. I have a podcast. I interviewed a lot. When I was cleaning those 700 swimming pools, imagine being able to peek in the window of 700 homes and get to watch the families that did it right and the families that did it wrong. I worked on Wall Street. I got to do the same thing with a bunch of CEOs, and I got to meet all kinds of companies that were doing things right and the ones that were doing something wrong. And I've had 10 million people do a Spartan or a Tough Mudder event. So I get to see a lot of people doing everything right or everything wrong.
Yeah.
And one thing's for sure, being humble, being compassionate, being willing to help is actually a more powerful tool than, having a tough exterior and taking no bullshit. So the side of Joe that is take no bullshit, tough exterior is really just trying to make you accountable and kick your ass in the way it needs to be kicked. The other side is, from my mom, which is just be a good person. I don't care what religion you subscribe to, just be a good person. You know what right and wrong is. And believe it or not, I had a wise guy, I had a tough guy say to me, I remember, he's gone now, but sitting at his long table, he was one of my pool customers. He was smoking a cigar. His wife was cooking meatballs. And he said, the best thing you do on this planet, this was a guy that killed people for a living.
Right.
He said you could help others. So I don't know if he was having a moment of reflection or what it was, but when the boss talked, I listened. And I try to help people.
Yeah. Well, in the story of your childhood, of like growing up in that environment and then knowing that you did want something more, seeing the conflict between your parents, or my parents are also divorced, and I very much relate to a lot of the things that you went through, where I feel like realizing now how I much more leaned into my mom's an educator, and how therapy kind of was like that outgrowth of the next step of like honoring my mom in some way. And my family on the other side has a family furniture business, a third generation furniture business. And I actively chose not to go into that because of family drama and conflict. And now as I've circled around in understanding what true entrepreneurship is and understanding what leadership is and understanding how psychology and all these things coming together, I'm finding this like healthy merging back of the different parts of me that I shunned and rejected. And I think a lot of what you're talking about, and I've seen it, like, you know, even with like Wim Hof, when you're talking about the taking the cold showers and all that stuff like that, and the breathing exercises, right? The discomfort and allowing yourself to just move that little step forward, that extra step, that extra thing, and seeing it on the show with the people you come in and like, they're like, you can watch them and like, there's no way that any of these people would do it without someone holding them accountable. So how do we find the right people to hold us accountable? Because I'm finding a lot of times people are just searching out there for, right, the quick gurus or the quick success program or and they're not really going into that true deep accountability. So what are some of the thoughts on that?
It's going to sound self-serving, but it's not. I'm doing this a long time. I've seen everybody come and go, the latest Suzanne Summers gimmick, you name it, Jack LaLanne's juicer, whatever. Not that it's a gimmick, like I'd rather you drink, you know, fresh vegetable and fruit juice than the stuff that's coming out of a can or a plastic bottle. But it's really, really simple. You're not going to do the work if you don't have a date on the calendar. It's not gonna happen by reading a book. It's unfortunately not gonna happen by listening to a podcast. It just doesn't work. You could talk all you want about it. Talk is cheap. You need to sign up for something hard. And that's when change occurs. Sure, there might be a tiny percentage, somebody like you or I that reads a book or something, and that fires us up, but we were already fired up.
Yeah.
Everybody else, 99% of the people are sleepwalking through life. They're not getting it done. Just look at the data. They're just not getting it done. They have to sign up for something hard. You're not turning coal into diamonds without pressure. Sorry. I wish I had a better answer for you, but.
Yeah. And that pivots perfectly into the parenting book that you wrote about families. And, you know, where it is this catch-22 of, you know, the psychology of what's over-coddling, under-coddling, putting them into pressure situations, stepping in and helping and uplifting and putting on our shoulders, all the different dimensions of that. When you talk about parenting and having your kids do the things that you've done or putting them out in these circumstances, a lot of people, right, you've talked about, like, people think like, well, that's crazy. This guy is pushing too hard. And I know there was a case of, I think it was your social media or someone's social media where they talked about some kid who they had their kid run a half marathon and Child Protective Services showed up at their house. What do you feel is the most important parenting / family core values to push?
I think here's some tactics and strategies to having an amazing family. Is one, recognize and accept both you and your spouse that you're different, you're wired different, you're completely different gender, like you're designed to do different things. Don't expect that the husband is going to walk in and say the perfect thing. Don't expect that the wife is going to come in and say the perfect thing. It's not happening. You don't believe me? Watch movies. Every movie, you're sitting there and you're like, yeah, I knew he's doing the same. Of course, because we're the same as men and they're the same as women. And so accept that, both sides. Make sure you look each other in the eyes and accept that. Number two, practice hard, because anything worth doing, a marriage, having children, running 100 miles, building a business, anything worth doing is going to be hard. You're going to go into the valley of death. Often you're going to want to quit. But if you practice hard, you're more likely to get through it. Number three, I would say you should have a mission statement. You and your family should just sit down, lay out what your true north is. What's our goal here as a family? And then every decision you're about to make, reflect back on that goal and think, wait a minute, our goal is to be the family that makes it 50 years. Okay, then why are you out with your buddies drinking on a Friday night flirting with that girl? That doesn't fit the mission, right? So make sure you lay out a clear mission that the entire family is bought into. Do it with them. And if you have children, you're not supposed to focus on them being your best friend. Your job is to make sure they're ready for tomorrow. that they're going to be able to stand without you. You're raising adults. And so almost every choice, when given the choice between do I make them go the hard way or the easy way, should be the hard way. In that neighborhood I grew up in, the organized crime bosses that gave their kids everything because when they grew up they had nothing and they wanted to shower those, the kids turned out to be useless. And I don't only see it there, I see it all over the place. You know, all kinds of wealthy families send me their kids to try to fix them at 21 years old. The families that made their kids work, for, you know, to get a nice car and do all the tough stuff, those kids turned out to be self-sufficient and good kids. So get your mission statement right, recognize your differences, and do hard stuff. And model it, by the way. Don't ask your family to do the hard stuff and then you're not doing it. You're sitting eating popcorn on the couch. Like, model the behavior you want.
Yeah, I saw that with one of my families. We were trying to figure out, like, their kids were, you know, middle school, and they're like, well, I don't know if I've, like, the fear of a parent is never doing enough to get them to be successful. And it was pretty much spot on with what you just said of like, well, let's reverse engineer it. If you were to create a Boy Scout / Girl Scout merit badge book for your own family, by the time they're 18, I want them to be proficient in these skills in these categories that I know that they'll be self-sufficient enough. What would that be? And they were just like dumbfounded, like that. It's that simple of a reverse engineer. Do you want them to know how to change gas and do an oil change and whatever it is? Like, what are all the different categories that would make you feel confident as a parent? Because I can see this all the time, that people never feel like there's enough. And I know you don't have kids yet out of the house, but are there things that you, based on what you're doing, do you feel like you have more confidence that when they're 18 and ready to move out of the house, that they will have everything, versus there's still that emotional father part of you that, like, even that might not be enough?
Listen, anybody listening to me right now is saying, oh, this guy, he's too tough on his kids or whatever. And I just want you to know that I'm not tough enough, that I am just like every other dad and every other mom, and I could be doing a lot more. They should know how to pump their own gas. They should know how to change a carburetor. They should know how to, but I've been so focused on some other things that make me feel good and get me to spend more time with my kids that even I'm failing at it. So if I'm failing at it, I can't even imagine everybody else that's trying to make their kid their best friend. I could definitely do more. I mean, I laughed at my wife years ago. I said, we got to move to New Delhi, India. We got to live in a slum. We got to make them tougher.
And then what? All right. And I mean, because I'm in South Florida and I see this, and I went from public school to private school, and I went into that environment where I was around the kids who had, while I was a kid who hadn't. And that allowed me to, like, build up some resilience, have to do it on my own, learn how to do things the hard way versus kids who were just handing things. And I think that there was some resentments for sure along the way of that, but now looking back, that I can say that I built something on my own. But, like, what's the next thing? Like, especially for, like, when you're now doing the book that just came out, like, what is the big, most consistent thing you're seeing with parenting with children that are coming up as the biggest struggle?
I mean, think about it this way. You're listening, you're a parent, or you hope someday to be a parent. Are you teaching your kids to go up, over, and through obstacles that they will face in life? Or are you moving the obstacles out of the way so that they have no chance of navigating them on their own? That's it. And I mean, that's the problem. Today, we're moving obstacles out of the way. We're not having them fully functioning on their, like, when I meet all these successful people, I dive into their childhood, and invariably what you hear is their parents push them out of the house. Richard Branson rode 100 miles at a very young age to get home. Became a very adventurous person. I can give you story after story after story where these young kids had to roll up their sleeves, boys and girls, and FFIO on their own. And the problem we're having today is, oh, we can't do that. That's going to upset them. That'll upset little Johnny. And that, like, well, your choice. They could be upset now, or they could be a failure later.
Yeah. And is that part of the learned helplessness that you?
Yeah, we're learning helplessness. That's what's happening. We're all learning helplessness. We're not learning how to survive and thrive. Getting softer and more mushy, and it's disgusting. Actually, listen. You don't believe me? Look at the military. Look at what a hard time and how much money they spend they're having trying to recruit any kids. And the kids they think they got can't even pass the tests.
Really?
Yeah. So it's a disaster. They're getting fatter. I don't care if that's politically incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely less healthy to be heavy. They're getting fatter. They're getting sicker, and definitely more delicate. So I'm a politically incorrect machine.
Yeah. Well, I realize that because my grandfather served in World War II, and I remember whenever I go to the cemetery outside of Scranton, Pennsylvania, to visit the family, I see how many flags are on the gravestones in that cemetery, and then going to any local Miami, South Florida cemetery, and how very rare there are. And again, like picking aside all the crazy polarization in politics, right? Do you think like the society at that time where there was more of a larger pride of a bigger picture of buying into something, team, community, not necessarily like this crazy nationalism that could be on one side or the other, but what do you think like really has shifted the most about that mindset? Like you're saying, like people are getting that much softer, even people who were signing up for the military aren't even ready for this, where that was kind of the standard in the 30s and 40s and 50s.
Think about Lewis and Clark. Lewis and Clark had a pretty tough life. They weren't even in the military, right? Sacagawea was carrying a 2-year-old during that entire expedition. Shackleton was stuck in the ice for 2 years with his boat and his men. He didn't lose one man. Are we different today? Are we less capable? Come on, you know the answer to that. We might not want to look in the mirror and admit it, but what's that show? There's that movie, WALL-E. Watch WALL-E because it's playing out.
Interesting. Yeah. And I guess the best way, right, is just like you said, going back to the simplicity of things, eat more salad, drink more water, get more sleep, spend more time, do the priorities and focusing on everything. So last, I know our time is limited, and I guess, of the 1,000,001 things that you talk about the most, and I know you kind of, right, I've seen you from episode to episode, if they can take away one thing, like that, I call it like standing on one foot. If you can teach anybody anything on one foot, that like forget everything else you've ever said, what would you want them to take away the most?
I guess if I had a choice, I could only choose one thing between salad, water, and sweating before breakfast. I can only pick one of them.
Above everything else, besides joining a Spartan Race and going to a gym, just one of those three things?
Yeah, it would be those three, and I guess it would be sweat before breakfast, because I had a 690-pound guy come to our farm in Vermont. I helped him lose a bunch of weight. He got down to 270 pounds,
wow.
55 pounds. And we did it on raw fruits and vegetables and walking every day. So my message would be raw fruits and vegetables and walk every day.
Awesome.
You'll be happier, you'll be healthier, you'll be able to keep your relationships, you'll do better at your job, everything will be better.
Absolutely love it. So we're going to take on, Joe, we're going to take on your challenge. So if you guys want to sign up, anybody listening to this wants to sign up for the Spartan Race, I'm committing to doing the Jacksonville one. If you want to join me for that, please reach out to me directly. If you want to do another one that's more local to you, I'm willing to drive the 5 to 6 hours to Jacksonville for the weekend and doing it. Please find one near you. Please, if you're a family and a parent, please check out the latest book that Joe just wrote, 10 Rules for Resilience, Mental Toughness for Families. And he's got the 2 other books, Spartan Up and definitely check out the Spartan Fit, and check out his podcast, YouTube channels. And again, Joe, I really do want to thank you for the time. I know it's a crazy day and a crazy time. So thank you again for sharing with us.
Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the You Winning Life podcast. If you are ready to minimize your personal and professional struggles and maximize your potential, we would love it if you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at You Winning Life.